Market is where the exchange of goods and services takes place, the buy and sell, while integration is a set of affairs or a process of involving attempts to combine separate national economic into larger economic regions. Now, let us define market integration. Market integration is an indicator that explains how much different markets related to each other. It occurs when prices among different locations or related goods follow similar patterns over a long period of time. According to Cambridge Business English Dictionary, market integration is a situation in which separate markets for the same product became one single market. If markets are well integrated, it can be assumed that market forces are working properly, meaning that price changes in one location are consistently related to the price changes in other locations, and market agents are able to interact between different markets. Before the rise of today's modern economy, people only produce for their family. Nowadays, economy demands the different sectors to work together in order to produce, distribute, and exchange products and services. So, what caused this shift in the way people produce for their needs? In order to understand this, we'll be going back in time 12,000 years ago.
Hi Lola, we are reading about agricultural revolution. Can you tell me, what was it? Thanks, Arjun.
Well, somewhere around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago, humans were living all over the globe in small, loosely organized groups of hunter-gatherers. These groups moved around a lot, hunting whatever animals they could find and using available plants for food. Life as a hunter-gatherer was hard. You had to follow flocks where they drifted and pick up and move when the resources of one area were exhausted. Eventually, people in the Middle East, Africa, and Western Asia began to settle down into agricultural villages. Agriculture is the process of modifying the environment in order to use it more effectively. These villages formed when people began to domesticate plants and animals. By domestication, we mean to make something useful to humans. That can include anything, from roping livestock, to taming a dog, to selectively breeding vegetables, to make them bigger and more nutritious. So, with their domesticated plants and animals, villagers had a steady source of food. Animals could also be used to work on the land, as well as supply leather, furs, and fertilizer. According to the experts, they consider that the very first place where humans contributed in farming was something called the Fertile Crescent. This area of what is now northern Africa and the Middle East had fertile soil, gentle rains, and long springs and summers, all of which made it an ideal spot for farming. The agricultural life wasn't easy at first. People didn't have the stress of moving around constantly, but they became more vulnerable to elements like weather, and their diets suffered from lack of variety. Early villagers could only grow limited types of food. The people tended to be smaller and less healthy than hunter-gatherer populations. Then, there are the issues of waste and disease. When large populations start to settle down together, they produce a lot of trash. And when so many people live close together, diseases spread easily. It's true, agriculture doesn't seem like such a great development at first, but our lives would be really different if our ancestors had never settled down. Today, we can look back on the first agricultural revolution, which is also called the Neolithic Revolution, as a turning point in the history of the world.
The first big economic change was the agricultural revolution, when people learned how to domesticate plants and animals. They realized that it was much more productive than hunter-gatherer societies. This became the new agricultural economy. Farming helped societies build surpluses, meaning not everyone had to spend their time producing food. Unlike hunter-gatherers, they spent most of their time in hunting, fishing, and harvesting wild food. This, in turn, led to major developments like permanent settlements, trade networks, and population growth.
The economic developments of the 1800s saw the development of agrarian and handicraft economies in Europe and America transform into industrial urbanized ones. The term to describe this phenomenon would be known as the Industrial Revolution, and was first used by French writers but made popular by English economic historian Arnold Toynbee. The Industrial Revolution was underpinned by the Agricultural Revolution. From the mid-18th century to the mid-19th century, agricultural production increased significantly. The huge increase in food output supported the expansion and sustained a large population and boosted trade. The increased use of machines over human or animal power in farming also meant that less farm workers were needed, and they could leave the land to industrial towns. Better metals and richer fuel also contributed to industrialization by creating the steam engine, an integral machine to industrialization which powered factories, locomotives, and ships. The new steam engines used coal and iron, both in their construction and as fuel, increasing demand for these resources. Roads, canals, and railways changed Britain dramatically, connecting Britain and allowing goods to be sent over long distances. Visually, the revolution was clear in the new industrial towns, with smoking factories dominating the skyline. The cities were horrible to live in, overcrowded and dirty with dangerous conditions in the factories and strict rules and punishments. The Industrial Revolution saw mechanization in factories of the textile industry, which was previously manufactured in the home, creating the term cottage industry. Now, production could be increased on a large scale because of new inventions such as the spinning mule and the power loom. The iron industry developed with Henry Bessemer's inexpensive process for mass-producing steel. Iron and steel were key materials for constructing the tools and machinery, steam engines, and ships needed for the industrial progress. Industrial labor opportunities drew people to the cities from the countryside, to such an extent that in 1750 only 15% of the population of Britain lived in towns. By 1850, over 50% of the entire population of Great Britain lived in either a town or a city, and by 1900 it was 85%. London had 4.5 million people, Glasgow 760,000, Liverpool 685,000, and Manchester and Birmingham 500,000. Great Britain was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution and was the only mature industrial economy for a long time. Historians have speculated that this was because, as an island, there was relative peace and stability for Britain compared to mainland Europe. Rather than spending on a large defensive standing army, capital could be spent on other ventures, and there was confidence for investors. Native resources were also abundant and readily available for initial technological developments and inventions. Engineers and inventors were also respected and encouraged in British society and were backed by wealthy patrons. A powerful navy and an empire bringing in vast wealth from its colonies also contributed to the catalyst for industrialization before others. Nevertheless, Germany, France, Switzerland, Belgium, and the United States soon emulated Britain's industrial change, and by 1900, Britain would no longer be at the top, with the United States as the world's leading industrial nation in the 20th century.
The second major economic revolution is the Industrial Revolution of the 1800s. With the rise of industry came new economic tools like steam engines, manufacturing, and mass production. With the help of this, the work of the people became easier. Factories popped up and changed how work functioned. Instead of working at home, where people work for their family by making things from start to finish, they began working as wage laborers and then becoming more specialized in their skills. Overall, productivity went up, standards of living rose, and people had access to a wider variety of goods due to mass production. However, every economic revolution comes with economic casualties. The workers in the factories, who were mainly poor women and children, worked in dangerous conditions for low wages. As a result, 19th were known as robber barons. With more productivity came greater wealth, but also greater economic inequality. The 19th century saw substantial advances in international market integration and the creation of a truly world economy. Technological advance was critical in this. The railroad, locomotive, and the marine steam engine revolutionized world transport. Steamships connected the world's ports to each other, creating a new and faster world transport network. Freight rates fell and goods could be carried across the world to ever more distant markets and still be cheaper in those faraway places than the same item produced locally. So that is the history of global market integration. I hope you learned a lot today. Thank you.